welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just digging into archaeology in the usual sense. We're looking at this collision point where mythology seems to crash right into advanced physics.
Exactly.
So we're embarking on a deep dive into some of the most, let's say, controversial claims out there. That ancient texts, thousands of years old, describe these incredibly sophisticated flying machines, Vimanas, anti-gravity ones, no less.
And not just flying machines. They also seem to talk about wars. Wars fought with weapons that sound unnervingly like atomic bombs.
It's an explosive thesis, you could say, almost literally.
Yes. Our sources today, they're mainly rooted in some pretty meticulous textual analysis. We're talking ancient Hindu epics, the Vedas, the Mahabharata, and also that often debated text, the Vai Manika Shastra. And the aim, really, is to try and systematically decode the technical details, these little nuggets buried within what are often seen as purely spiritual or, historical accounts.
So our mission here is to give you, the listener, a kind of framework for understanding these claims. We'll be digging into the core textual evidence, trying to analyze these bizarrely specific technical details.
And there are so many specifics. Metallurgy, propulsion systems.
Exactly. And crucially, we have to grapple with the bigger picture too, the philosophical side. This idea of a Vedic science, which the sources call science VED, and how that lines up, or maybe doesn't, with our modern empirical science, what we're calling science EMP.
It's a fascinating comparison. And maybe to appreciate just how radical this reevaluation of history is, we should start where some of the Western engagement began. Think about this quote. It's from Colonel Henry S. Olcott back in 1881. This is way before the Wright brothers, remember?
Right, before powered flight as we know it.
He said in a lecture, "The ancient Hindus could navigate the air, and not only navigate it, but fight battles in it." And then he adds this kicker. To be so perfect in aeronautics, they must have known all the arts and sciences related to the science, including the strata and currents of the atmosphere, the relative temperature, humidity, density, and specific gravity of the various gases.
Okay, that's stunning for 1881.
Yeah.
He's not just saying they had flying carts. He's implying mastery of aerodynamics, meteorology, material science, the whole package.
Precisely. That level of knowledge implies a whole scientific infrastructure, right? Not just some lone genius inventor.
Yeah, a fully formed civilization focused on this stuff. Okay, let's use that idea, this concept of a complete aeronautical civilization, as our launch pad. Let's dive into section 1, the historical record, the textual descriptions. So when we talk about ancient aeronautics based on these texts, it's apparently far beyond just simple planes or chariots.
Oh, much more. We're talking about structures that suggest a total commitment to high-altitude living and travel. The Mahabharata, for instance, it repeatedly describes flying aerial cities.
Not just vehicles, but cities in the air.
Exactly. That's a huge distinction, isn't it? It moves it way beyond just, a flying chariot for a god.
Right.
These were, according to the sources, vast mobile habitats, which points to, as they put it, a higher degree of scientific achievement and technical skill than we usually imagine for those times.
Think about the logistics needed for that. A mobile city. You need life support, food, waste management, sustainable propulsion for the long haul.
Absolutely. And the scale implied is immense. The text consistently suggests these cities, and the larger craft too, moved incredibly high up.
Oh, how are we talking?
Descriptions mention above the region of the clouds and very probably in the exosphere region.
The exosphere, that's basically the edge of space. It sounds almost like orbital or near-orbital capability millennia ago.
It does stretch the imagination, I know. And the Vimanas themselves, they weren't just one design, like a Model T Ford.
No.
No, the variety described suggests a long period of development, refinement. Almost like looking through an old manufacturer's catalog.
Okay, like what? Give us an example.
Well, the most famous one, probably from the Ramayana, is described as a double-deck circular aircraft with portholes and a dome.
Wait, double-deck, circular, portholes, dome? If you describe that today, people would immediately think
flying saucer. Exactly, a classic mid-20th century UFO description.
And how did it fly?
It was noted to fly with the speed of the wind, which is vague, yes, but also gave forth a melodious sound.
Melodious sound. Not like a roaring engine, then. Suggest something smooth, maybe?
Perhaps. Smooth operation, speed control, maybe. But that saucer shape, that was just one type. The texts also detail, get this, cigar-shaped airships.
Okay, long cylinders. More like a dirigible or something else.
Seems like it. Implying craft capable of holding more people, maybe cargo, traveling long distances. Then you have these specialized models mentioned.
Like military versions?
Possibly. There's the Tripura, described as having 3 stories, and the Sakuna, which was apparently bird-like in shape.
3 stories. Bird-like, circular cigars. It's quite a range.
It is. And the sources we looked at claim there were actually 113 documented subdivisions branching off these 4 main types.
113
Yeah.
subdivisions. That doesn't sound like myth anymore. That sounds like, I don't know, the ancient Indian equivalent of Jane's All the World's aircraft.
It does have that feel, doesn't it? That level of detailed taxonomy. It really suggests a practical, widespread technology, something that needed specific classifications for different uses.
Yeah, standardization.
Yeah.
Engineering for different missions, high altitude, short hops, maybe troop transport, who knows?
Exactly. And this tech, it wasn't just, sitting in a lab somewhere. It was deeply woven into their spiritual and religious stories.
Right, the Vimanas often show up as the vehicles of gods or heroes or kings.
Blurring that line between what we'd call divine power and what might have been high technology. Take the Srimad Bhagavatam. It describes a king, Siddhaketu, traveling through outer space. Not on a magic carpet, but on a brilliantly effulgent airplane given to him by Lord Vishnu.
So the gift is divine, but the object. It's described as an airplane, a functional machine.
Seems so. Capable of space travel, no less. And we see this idea of widespread use pop up elsewhere, too. In the Mahavira of Pavaputi, that's a Jain text referencing older traditions, it talks about the Pushpaka aerial chariot. But not just carrying one hero, it's conveying many people to the city of Ayodhya. And listen to this description of the sky.
Yeah.
It says the sky was full of stupendous flying machines, dark as night, but picked out by lights with a yellowish glare.
Wow, full of them. Dark with yellowish lights. That's incredibly specific. It sounds like air traffic control might have been busy.
Doesn't it? Not just a single hero on a solo flight, but potentially dozens of large, dark craft, maybe with navigation lights or power glows. The fact that this imagery appears across different texts, different traditions, it strengthens the idea that maybe this was a shared cultural memory of something real.
Even in the really old texts.
Yeah.
Like the Rig Veda.
Even there. The Rig Veda describes the chariot of Vada, the god of wind. It's called thunderous. It can touch heaven. It makes the light lurid like a red fiery glare, and it whirls up dust on the ground.
Powerful, noisy, bright machines. Sounds like they made quite an impact.
Definitely sounds like more than just a horse-drawn cart. Now, here's where it gets even stranger, maybe. Let's bring this technology down from the sky.
Okay.
Because one of the most unexpected claims in the sources is that these flying machines actually influenced later architecture on the ground.
How so? They built temples that look like spaceships?
Basically, yes. The Samarangana Sutratara, another ancient text, explicitly claims that temples were designed after models of flying machines. It shows, the source says, an overt cognizance of this link.
So they were intentionally trying to make their temples resemble these Vimanas. Like memorializing the technology in stone.
That seems to be the argument. And you can kind of see it if you look at certain structures. Early temples like the Harmakasira temple, which is sort of conical, or the Virupaksha temple at Patadakal with its tapering shape. The overall structure, it does bear a resemblance, the sources argue, to a vertically oriented craft. Maybe like a modern helicopter or a VTOL, but, flipped upside down and made huge.
Oh. I'd have to see pictures side by side, but okay.
Yeah.
Any big examples?
The main one cited is the giant Konaraka temple. It was explicitly designed to be the chariot of Surya, the sun god.
The Sun Chariot Temple, right. I know that one. Huge wheels carved on the side.
Exactly. And its core structure was built using an octagonal pattern on this massive rectangular base. The point is, the architects seem to have been deliberately embedding the memory, the form of these powerful vehicles into their most sacred, permanent buildings.
Suggesting that Vimanas weren't some fringe legend, but maybe central to how they understood power, cosmology, everything.
That's the implication, yes. That this knowledge was fundamental.
Okay, so we've got the scale flying cities, dozens of types, influencing architecture. But scale doesn't fly on its own. You need power, you need blueprints. Which brings us to the really, really controversial stuff. The technical claims.
Right. And the main text people point to for the mechanics is the Vai Manika Shastra, attributed to Maharishi Bharadwaja.
And the headline claim from that text, according to our sources, is
that there seems to be no doubt Vimanas were powered by some form of anti-gravity.
Anti-gravity, there it is. Now, before we dive into that, the Vai Manika Shastra itself, we need to add a little note here for the listener, right? About its authenticity.
Yes, absolutely. It's crucial context. While we're analyzing the claims in the text based on our sources, it's important everyone understands that mainstream Sanskrit scholars, while they often date the final writing of this specific document much later, like early 20th century.
So the argument is it might be someone in the 1900s interpreting older ideas, maybe through a modern lens, rather than a purely ancient text itself.
That's the debate, yes. Is it a direct transmission or a reconstruction, potentially with later ideas mixed in? We don't have the final answer, but Hardwaja himself in the text refers to older sources.
Okay, so we're looking at what the text claims, understanding there's this debate about its origins, and it claims anti-gravity. How is that described?
The functionality described is consistent with it. Vertical takeoff, the ability to hover motionless in the air, much like a modern helicopter or maybe a dirigible, but potentially without downward thrust.
Which would imply some force countering gravity directly.
Exactly, and the text tries to lend itself credibility by citing its own sources. Hardwaja supposedly refers to no less than 70 different authorities and 10 experts on air travel from antiquity.
70 authorities, 10 experts. Where are their books?
Vanished. Lost to time, apparently. Which, proponents argue, suggests a huge body of scientific knowledge that was catastrophically lost, making these surviving fragments, even if confusing, incredibly important.
Okay, let's get into the engine room, so to speak. Where were these things kept, and what did they run on?
They were kept in a Vimana griha, basically a hangar. As for fuel, this is where it gets murky and really interesting.
How so?
Sometimes it's described as a yellowish-white liquid, but the most frequent and most detailed fuel source mention is mercury, specifically a purified mercury compound.
Mercury, like the liquid metal.
Yes. Though the sources acknowledge there's confusion, they state that later writers, looking back at earlier texts, were understandably confused on the principle of their propulsion.
Understandably confused. That sounds about right. It could mean the technology was lost and people were guessing based on fragments.
That's a very plausible interpretation. Maybe the mercury wasn't the primary fuel, but, say, a working fluid, or a catalyst, or part of the propellant system, but not the energy source itself. Later generations might easily confuse those roles if the core science was gone.
But the mercury idea, that's the one that really jumps out, isn't it? Because it connects to modern physics in a weird way.
It absolutely does. It points directly towards plasma physics and specifically ion engines.
Ion engines. Explain that connection.
Well, ion propulsion works by accelerating ions charged particles using electric fields to create thrust. It's very efficient for space travel. And what do you need for an ion engine? A propellant. Something easily ionized and preferably heavy.
Like mercury.
Exactly. Mercury was one of the first propellants seriously researched for ion engines in the mid-20th century by NASA and others. It offers high thrust for the power used. So these ancient texts talking about purified mercury for propulsion, it sounds startlingly like they're describing a mercury ion drive.
And the texts claim this knowledge is ancient.
The sources emphasize that mercury itself was known in India way, way back, maybe 11,000 years ago, they suggest.
Okay, but using it in an engine, that requires processing, right? It's toxic stuff.
Highly toxic. And the texts actually describe the preparation method in almost ritualistic detail. The Dharnadhar Samhita supposedly gives 16 distinct steps to purify mercury.
16 steps. Like what?
The process is called shodhana, purification, or sometimes bhasma, calcination. It involves things like heating thin metal sheets, then immersing them in substances like oil tela and cow urine gomutra.
Cow urine. Okay, that sounds alchemical.
It does have that flavor, doesn't it? Or calcining the mercury in crucibles heated with cow dung fires called puttam. But think about it. If you were trying to develop something like an ion engine using mercury, you'd face huge problems.
Like the toxicity.
Toxicity, yes. But also containing high temperature plasma, dealing with electrode erosion. These were major hurdles for modern engineers working with mercury ion drives in the 50s and 60s. NASA eventually switched to xenon partly because of these issues.
So does this incredibly detailed, almost ritualistic purification process, even with the cow products, does it suggest they actually mastered those problems?
That's the tantalizing question. Is it just alchemy? Or does the sheer specificity, the 16 steps, the controlled heating, the specific quenching agents imply a lost practical understanding? A way to stabilize and process this dangerous element for essentially industrial power generation. It hints at a forgotten mastery of plasma physics, needing immense control over temperature and chemistry.
Wow. Okay, moving beyond the fuel.
Yeah.
What about the ship itself? Materials?
Equally specific, the texts apparently detail 3 main types of metals: somala, sandalika, and morthwika.
Names I've never heard.
Exactly. And when combined in certain ways, they supposedly resulted in 16 different kinds of specialized heat-absorbing metals, again, with untranslatable names like Ushnam Vara.
Heat absorbing. That makes sense. If you've got a powerful engine or you're moving fast through the atmosphere, Ushnam Vara, does that mean anything?
Roughly translates to heat-bearing or heat-absorbing. So yes, it points directly to thermal management, which is critical for high-speed flight or powerful energy sources.
And they knew how to work these metals.
Apparently so. The texts are said to explain how to clean the alloys using acids from lemon or apple and detail the right oils and temperatures for forging or shaping them. It sounds less like myth and more like, well, proprietary industrial processes.
Like the kind of stuff Boeing or Lockheed Martin would keep secret today?
Precisely. And it doesn't stop there. There are descriptions of 7 different types of engines, supposedly suited for different altitudes or functions.
7 engines.
And power systems that included solar energy collectors. The Vai Manika Shastra apparently specifies using 8 tubes made of special glass to capture the sun's rays.
So, knowledge of specialized materials, metallurgy, multiple engine types, and renewable energy.
That's what's claimed, and all this complex engineering, unsurprisingly, seems to point towards sophisticated military uses, which Bharadwaja's text lays out in the 7 Secrets of Flight, the Vai Manika Shastra.
The 7 secrets. Okay, this sounds like the good stuff. Ancient aerial warfare tactics. Let's run through them. What's first?
First is Gudha, means hiding or concealed.
Stealth.
Essentially, yes. It describes using the dark content of the solar ray, maybe manipulating light, and harnessing atmospheric powers, yasa, vyasa, prayasa, found in the 8th atmospheric layer to make the Vimana invisible.
Exploiting atmospheric layers for stealth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next. Drishya means visible or to be seen, but used here for camouflage or illusion. By creating a Maya Vimana, basically a phantom or decoy Vimana, this was done by reflecting a glow generated by colliding electric and wind power using a special mirror called the Vishwa Kriya Drapana.
Creating optical illusions to confuse the enemy. Cloaking, decoys, very modern tactics. What about offense?
Ah, yes. Vimukha means averting the face or disabling.
Disabling how?
This involves projecting poison powder. Specific substances like kubera are named, fired through a tube in a mirror.
A mirror weapon.
Seems so. The effect. To produce wholesale insensibility and coma in enemy crews, basically chemical or biological warfare delivered from the air.
Grim. Okay, what's next? Rupakashana.
Yes, Rupakashana. Intelligence gathering. This one is really startling.
Why? What does it describe?
It describes using a photographic yantra, a device or instrument in the Vimana, to get a television view inside enemy planes.
Hold on. A television view inside an enemy plane. In ancient texts, that sounds anachronistic, doesn't it? How do the sources explain that?
That's exactly where the skepticism gets loudest, especially regarding the Vai Manika Shastra's dating. Critics point to television view as clear proof of 20th century influence.
Makes sense.
But proponents push back. They argue yantra just means device or instrument, and the core concept is remote visual interception. Seeing inside an enemy craft from a distance, whether the mechanism was optical, like a powerful telescope or something else, the claimed function is the key. It implies a deep understanding of light, transmission, capture.
Remote surveillance, basically. Okay, one more.
Last one mentioned here is chapla. Seems to mean agitation or trembling used for attack.
How does this attack work?
By generating a high-speed atmospheric wave, the text gives a specific frequency, 4087 revolutions an hour, whatever that translates to precisely. You turn a switch, it sends out this wave.
And shakes the enemy plane apart.
That seems to be the idea. To violently shake it, destabilize it. We're not talking magic here. The description implies calculating resonant frequencies to physically destroy a target.
The level of detail in these secrets, it's staggering. It really does sound less like myth and more like, well, an operations manual for aerial warfare.
It certainly pushes us to reconsider what might have been possible, or at least what was recorded as being possible.
And the moment you have aircraft with stealth, chemical weapons, surveillance, you know they were built for conflict. Which leads us straight into Section 3, and the most terrifying implication of all, ancient descriptions of what sounds disturbingly like atomic warfare.
Yes, the context provided by the sources is, well, it's catastrophic. They talk about a civilization called the Rama Empire.
Located where? When?
Supposedly in northern India and Pakistan, flourishing maybe 15,000 years ago, the sources suggest, possessing incredibly advanced technology.
15,000 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And what happened to them?
According to these accounts, they weren't destroyed by invaders or natural disasters. They were destroyed by wars. Wars fought amongst themselves using these advanced vehicles and what are described as futuristic weapons.
Self-destruction with high technology.
That's the narrative. And the memory, the trauma of this ancient annihilation was supposedly so profound that it echoed down the centuries. It's claimed that King Ashoka,
The famous emperor, 3rd century BCE, known for converting to Buddhism, renouncing violence.
that's the one. He was reportedly aware of this ancient history, this catastrophic war, and the sources suggest this was his main reason for trying to keep certain knowledge secret.
What knowledge?
The dangerous stuff, the blueprints, the operating principles of these incredibly destructive weapons and vehicles. He might have even actively destroyed records.
So Ashoka as a keeper of secrets, trying to prevent history from repeating itself.
Essentially, yes, a policy of deliberate technological suppression born from the belief that same knowledge is just too dangerous for humanity.
And that fear seems horribly validated when you read the descriptions in the Mahabharata. They read like eyewitness accounts of a nuclear blast and its aftermath.
They are chillingly specific. The text describes the omens before the main event. Winds blew, meteors fell in thousands, thunder rolled through a cloudless sky.
Sounds like atmospheric shock waves, maybe an EMP effect. Strange weather anomalies.
Could be interpreted that way. And then there's the weapon itself, the Brahmastra.
The ultimate weapon in the epics, right?
Yes. Drona warns Arjuna it's an irresistible weapon that could destroy the world. And crucially, it was forbidden to use it against ordinary human foes. The implication is its power was just too immense, almost planetary in scale.
And when it is used,
Yep.
what does the text say happened?
The description focuses on overwhelming energy. The arrows released appeared like fiery beams emanating from the sun globe.
Fiery beams from the sun, like the initial flash and thermal pulse of a nuke.
It certainly sounds like it. And the immediate result, total instant annihilation. Combatants fell like falling suns, people and elephants burned instantly.
Horrifying. What about the aftermath? That's often the key identifier for nuclear weapons.
Exactly. And this is where the descriptions become almost medically precise, matching what we now know about fallout and radiation. The text says, the water boiled, the animals died. It mentions trees collapse in rows.
Boiling water, trees flattened, suggests immense heat over a wide area, like a thermal wave.
Yes. And the description of the dead. Corpses were mutilated by the terrible heat so that they no longer looked like human beings.
Just charred remains. But the radiation sickness part, that's the clincher, isn't it?
It really is. The text includes this incredibly accurate detail. It says the poisoning, the effect of the weapon's lingering power will make hair and nails fall out.
Hair and nails falling out. That is a classic, specific symptom of acute radiation syndrome, something nobody in the pre-atomic age should have known or been able to describe clinically.
Precisely. Until Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that specific biological effect wasn't part of common knowledge anywhere. Yet here it is, laid out in an ancient epic. It really forces you to confront the possibility. Were they describing something they actually witnessed or had meticulously recorded? The effects of a weapon that defies conventional explanation for that era.
It's deeply unsettling. And if they had weapons like that and vehicles like Vimanas, where does it end? Do they claim travel beyond Earth?
Well, this is where the claims reach their most extreme point. The sources mention Sanskrit documents, supposedly found in Lhasa, Tibet, translated by a Dr. Ruth Rana.
Found in Tibet, what did they contain?
According to the report, they contain directions for building interstellar spaceships.
Interstellar. Not just atmospheric flight, not just orbit, but ships to travel between stars.
That's the claim. And the propulsion method described. Anti-gravitational, similar maybe to the Vimanas, but linked to a concept called lagima.
Lagima, what's that?
It's described as an internal power, the unknown power of the ego existing in man's physiological makeup. A psychic or yogic ability almost.
So, wait. The spaceships weren't just mechanical, they were powered by the mind.
Yeah.
Or consciousness.
That seems to be the idea. This lagima power could supposedly generate a centrifugal force, maybe a mistranslation or misinterpretation of the physics, powerful enough to counteract gravity. It could allow a person to levitate or potentially propel a craft.
Mind over matter, literally powering starships. We're back to that integration of the spiritual and the technological.
Deeply integrated. In this view, the highest levels of technology aren't achieved just through material science, but through mastery of the inner self, the life force, the prana. Technology becomes an extension of consciousness.
which sets up a fundamental clash with how we view science today, doesn't
Oh,
it?
absolutely. It leads us right into the philosophical debate.
Okay, so if these ancient texts genuinely contain blueprints for anti-gravity, descriptions of atomic weapons, maybe even interstellar travel, how on earth do we fit that into our modern scientific worldview, this science VED, the Vedic or spiritual science? How does it stack up against our empirical science, science EMP?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's not just a historical puzzle. It's a deep philosophical, even ontological
No.
debate. And it's not a new one, actually.
No.
No, this conversation, especially in the context of Hinduism and modernity, has been going on for over a century. Think about Frederick Soddy.
The physicist, early 20th century Nobel laureate.
That's him. Way back in 1909, he was already speculating about this. He wondered if there had been some former forgotten race of men who had attained not only to the knowledge we have so recently won, but also to the power that is not yet ours.
Power not yet ours. In 1909. What was he thinking of?
He explicitly tied it to potential destruction. He said, I believe that there have been civilizations in the past that were familiar with atomic energy, and that by misusing it, they were totally destroyed.
Wow, in 1909, that's decades before the Manhattan Project. He was already connecting forgotten ancient knowledge with atomic self-destruction.
He was, which shows this idea, this correlation, has been floating around in scientific circles for a long time. And contemporary Hindu writers, especially those involved in Hindu modernism or revivalism, often pick up on this thread.
How do they frame it?
Well, the argument often goes that science VED doesn't actually conflict with science EMP. Instead, it supplements or confirms it.
Supplements it how?
By providing a bigger picture. They position science VED as a superior, more holistic system. It takes all these fragmented disciplines, we have chemistry, physics, metallurgy, whatever, and places them onto a unified, holistic, spiritual plane.
So the idea is modern science gets lost in the details, the mechanics, whereas ancient science understood the underlying unity, the connection between mind, spirit, and matter.
That's the core argument. But there are some pretty significant conceptual hurdles in trying to actually merge these two worldviews.
Like what?
Well, think about a major school of Hindu philosophy like Advaita Vedanta. Its ultimate view of reality is very different from that of, say, modern physics.
How so?
Science EMP, our modern science, tries to understand how the universe evolves over time through natural causes, physical laws, material interactions.
Yeah, cause and effect, empirical observation.
But Advaita Vedanta ultimately views the entire physical cosmos, all its processes, everything we experience, as Maya, an illusion. A temporary, ultimately unreal appearance arising from the one true reality, which is Brahman eternal, unchanging consciousness.
Okay, so if the whole physical world is basically an illusion, Maya, then why spend time building incredibly complex, mercury-powered, heat-absorbing flying machines to navigate it? Isn't there a fundamental conflict there?
Exactly. There's an ontological tension. If physical reality is ultimately illusory and transient, then trying to understand its workings empirically, trying to manipulate it with technology, it could seem pointless, maybe even a distraction from seeking the true, non-material reality of Brahman.
So how do proponents of science VED deal with that?
Often by emphasizing the primacy of spiritual perception, of inner realization. Look at Swami Vivekananda, a key figure in modern Hinduism. He cited the ancient sage Patanjali on evolution.
What did he say?
Vivekananda claimed the real secret of evolution wasn't external struggle, like Darwin's sexual selection or survival of the fittest. It was the manifestation of the perfection which is already in every being, and unfolding from within. He saw that as a superior, more profound concept than materialist explanations.
Inner potential unfolding rather than external pressures shaping things.
Right. And you see a similar critique of purely material science from someone like A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, the Hare Krishna movement.
What was his take?
He consistently criticized Western materialistic science, even when it made big discoveries like finding antiparticles in physics. He argued it fundamentally failed.
Failed how?
Because it provided zero understanding of the inner self, of consciousness, of our relationship with the divine, which for him was Krishna consciousness. That knowledge, he argued, was infinitely superior.
So for these thinkers, modern science might reach the stars, but it can't reach the soul. It lacks a moral or spiritual compass.
That's a good way to put it. They saw science EMP as inherently flawed because it tries to separate the observer from the observed, the scientist from the spirit, which leads, they'd argue, to a fragmented understanding and potentially dangerous, morally blind applications of technology. like atomic bombs, perhaps.
Okay, but despite this philosophical gap, there's still this push, especially today, to prove the Vimana texts empirically, right? To build one based on the descriptions.
Absolutely. Which brings us back to those modern replication attempts, specifically the story of Shivkur Bapuju Talpe.
Talpe, late 19th, early 20th century. What's the story there?
Well, the sources we consulted state he conducted a successful trial of Vimana called the Marutsako, based entirely, supposedly, on the ancient writings he studied.
A successful trial. What does that mean? Does it fly?
The claims are pretty extraordinary. Reportedly, yes. It was launched, achieved a claimed velocity of around 40,000 kilometers per hour.
40,000 kilometers per hour. That's incredibly fast. Mach 30 plus. And landed safely.
And landed safely. That's the claim presented in the sources.
Okay, we definitely need that critical distance here again. While the sources report a successful trial, is there solid, independent, verifiable proof of that flight, that speed, the anti-gravity mechanism, from a strict science EMP standpoint?
That's where it gets murky. Comprehensive, independently verified documentation from that time. It's generally considered lacking by mainstream historians of science and technology. The details are debated, partly because of the era and the lack of formal institutional records compared to, say, the Wright brothers.
Right. So we should frame Talpe's work less as definitive proof and more as what? An early attempt by someone using science EMP methods to try and validate science VED knowledge.
Exactly. It's part of this ongoing effort. And apparently, it's not just history. The sources note that current research is still looking at the Marutsaka Vimana writings.
For what purpose?
Investigating the principles for potential real-world applications today, especially, it seems, for military UAVs, unmanned drones, and MAVs, micro-air vehicles.
So the concepts in these texts, however old or controversial, are still seen as potentially scientifically interesting, maybe even useful for modern technology.
It appears so, viable enough at least to warrant continued investigation, according to these sources. #tag outro.
Wow, okay. We started this deep dive talking about mythological chariots in the sky.
Yeah.
And we ended up dissecting things like the 16 steps for purifying mercury from potential ion engines and descriptions of nuclear fallout symptoms in the Mahabharata.
It's quite the journey through these texts.
It really is. We've seen this, well, this shocking correlation maybe between the engineering details claims for Vimanas and the effects of modern atomic physics. It's hard to just brush it off as pure coincidence, isn't it?
It certainly challenges easy explanations. These sources, taken together, they really compel us to at least reconsider the standard timeline of technological progress.
You mean it's not just a straight line, always upwards?
Maybe not. The narrative suggested here is that scientific knowledge might be cyclical, not linear. That profound understanding of anti-gravity, complex metallurgy, maybe even nuclear forces could have existed thousands of years ago.
But within a completely different framework, a spiritual, holistic one.
Exactly, which challenges that neat line we like to draw between science on one side and religion or spirituality on the other. Maybe that division wasn't always so clear-cut.
And as we wrap up, let's circle back to that really profound political or maybe moral point we touched on earlier.
About Ashoka.
Yeah. The sources suggest this advanced Rama empire destroyed itself with its own incredible weapons. And King Ashoka, supposedly knowing this history, witnessing the horror described in texts like the Mahabharata, he makes a conscious choice to conceal that knowledge.
To bury the secrets of those futuristic weapons.
So the provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on is this. If that account holds any truth, if advanced civilizations can self-destruct, and if we find ourselves today with technology capable of ending the world, what does it mean that an ancient ruler might have chosen deliberate ignorance or concealment as a form of planetary self-preservation?
It throws the idea of relentless progress into question, doesn't it? It raises this deeply uncomfortable question about moral responsibility. When our technological power reaches the point where it threatens our very existence, maybe the most scientific or wisest decision isn't always to push forward. Maybe sometimes it's to pause, or even to limit access.
A balance between seeking knowledge and understanding the ethical implications, which perhaps was a key idea in Science VED that maybe Science EMP is still struggling to integrate.
Perhaps. It suggests that true wisdom requires both understanding the how and the why, and maybe even the when not to.
Indeed. Something to think about. We encourage you to dive deeper into these fascinating and often bewildering sources yourself. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.